Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast for Friday, August 16th, 2024. This is episode 87. My name is Justin Young. I'm joined as always by Alicia Utecht and Mario Sanders. Hey, how are y'all doing?
Doing all right. Orientation week is almost over. We've got one more meeting that we'll be going to after this. And then the weekend of planning everything and then the start of the semester.
I say, hurry up and finish our syllabi over the weekend. And
Like it's the weekend of planning everything, not I've got everything planned except this one tiny thing I'm still working on. It's nope, everything gets planned this weekend.
Everything's already planned.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, definitely.
the whole semester is already set to go. We're just going straight in, fine.
I used to have a colleague at another school, and we would get to the finals week of the fall semester, and she would have her syllabi done for the spring semester.
I want to be that person.
Yeah. We all loved her, but we also hated her.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you're kind of annoy all your coworkers if you're that person. Has anybody started on their syllabi? She would sheepishly raise her hand. We're like, we all know.
Anybody other than...
So, it's kind of a busy weekend of sitting in front of a computer and typing out syllabi and everything. So, and I'm not here to mock that. I still got a lot of work to finish up on mine. Luckily, if you've been teaching the same classes, for a extended period of time, you don't have to rethink everything from the ground up, semester to semester.
Yeah, this will be the first time I'm teaching the intercultural class, but there's so many resources just because so many people have taught it for so long. And I think that because it's one of the core curriculum classes, it kind of has to stay the same across courses. And so thankfully it shouldn't be a ton. It's really just more familiarizing myself with some of the nuances than anything.
Yeah. I'm teaching the 101 class, which I taught 2 years ago when we had a different introductory course director. So I have all my lecture notes and I have all my assignment sheets and everything, but I'm still having to adapt from the template that Christina gave us as the current introductory course director versus the template I was used to from 2 years ago and being hold on, I know what's happening. I can do this.
You're teaching in person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm teaching an in-person section of the exploratory students, so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it should be good.
All right. Well, anything else exciting going on, or pretty much just completely overwhelmed?
So exhausted.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's the semester's starting, and then it's going to be wait. That's only going to make me busier.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll just move on to what we've been playing. And I guess we should start here at the top of this by doing something cumulative, all of us together, because we did not all play the same thing, but we did all watch the same thing.
Together?
Yes,
on
together.
Tuesday night.
We went to see the Borderlands film. So it was only the three of us in the theater watching the Borderlands film, which should tell you something about how the Borderlands film is doing in theaters.
I think the Rotten Tomatoes score went up to 9% now.
It's growing on critics. Soon it'll be 10, and then 20, and then 50.
It's growing on critics like a fungus. Yeah.
Just saying.
So we saw the Borderlands film. What do you think of the Borderlands movie?
I tried to express my feelings to you in the car immediately after, and I couldn't do it. And now it's 3 days later, and I feel like I'm even more lost. It wasn't great.
It broke your brain.
It's not the worst movie I've ever watched. That's a very low bar. I've watched Troll 2, so. I thought that the score was good. I thought Cate Blanchett was good, but I thought that the movie as a whole was just very boring.
When you lead with the biggest compliment you can pay a film is, I thought the score was good. Probably a bad sign. I think Mario, after the movie, I said to you, it wasn't as bad as I expected. And you were like, oh, you liked it? And I was like, no.
That's not what I said.
I expected it to be more of a train wreck than it was.
I saw a review where someone was like, It's no Super Mario Bros. 93.
I think that movie's kind of charming in some ways, but okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, so this film isn't so, it's not bad in the way that would be fun.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, when you mention something like Troll 2 or, Super Mario Brothers or the original Street Fighter live action film with Van Damme, like, those movies are bad, but they're bad in a way that makes them kind of fun to watch because they're just, like, so over the top and cheesy and goofy. There's, like, a charm to them in a way. This film is just so boring.
Yeah.
That's what I was telling friends. Like, this feels like it. I don't know, just thinking about the Borderlands franchise, this feels like it should be the perfect fun bad movie, but it's not even that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't allow themselves to be fun in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a movie you walk out, and I think one of the reasons that people have trouble talking about it is you walk out of the theater and it's almost instantly forgettable.
Yeah.
Like, if you ask me to recap that movie now, I would actually have a lot of trouble remembering, like, beat for beat everything that happens in that film. And I know, look, the one thing I did say after we left that was making me laugh, that I actually kind of laughed out loud during the movie, is there's a part very early on where Cate Blanchett lands on Pandora, the planet that Borderlands takes place on. And she lands on the planet and she gets onto this bus, which is kind of weird to begin with, that there's this bus that's taking her across the land and everything. And they just make it like a montage of her riding on this bus. And like, they're trying to do this joke about this in-flight sort of video that she has to watch that's explaining the land of Pandora. But it's just a montage of her riding a bus. And it's the most...
And it's like 2 cuts back to her, like, being like, can we shut this off? I'm not a Vault Hunter. And he's like, no can do, Vault Hunter.
Yeah, and it's
then it's just like more driving.
It's fading between different shots of her and this bus, and you're just like, what is this film? Like, this film got bored of itself.
I don't even think this is like 20 minutes into the movie either.
No, it's not.
It's like the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, and like, and the other thing, I was talking to a friend about this, that you look at the cast for this film. So Cate Blanchett, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Black doing a voice, but he's in it. That's like a pretty high caliber cast to get for a movie, like any movie. But to get those people to sign on to do this video game movie, and then they all feel completely wasted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, to add to that, Kevin Hart as well. Like, these are also not cheap people.
Oh yeah, Kevin Hart was in it.
Like,
he's one of the main characters, and I forgot he was in it.
These are people you're going to have to pay like a pretty good amount of money for them to like sign on to something.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, Cate Blanchett's an Oscar winner,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, this is not like you're just getting. This isn't the Wing Commander movie where you're getting Matthew Lillard and Freddie Prinze Jr. to do it, like when they're 21 and like just starting out their careers. These are established good actors, which one assumes. I mean, I assume if you pay Kevin Hart enough money, he'll go do just about anything, movie wise. But like, also he has to have other options.
Yeah.
It's not like this is the only movie that Kevin Hart can do.
I'll say none of these people are hurting for money.
You wouldn't think.
I think it's we can assume that these people are, Cate Blanchett's still making money off Lord of the Rings and Thor Ragnarok. Like,
I think this is not like even that serious of a critique, but I think the thing that continually took me out of the movie was them treating Cate Blanchett and Jamie Lee Curtis as though they were like a significant gap in age.
Yeah,
when
Jamie Lee Curtis is like her foster mother.
Which, like, I mean, I was just looking up. Jamie Lee Curtis is 10 years older, so like there is an age difference there. But like it felt weird every time. I was like,
I associate
these are like
them with
two
the same generation.
very much adult, like middle-aged women at this point.
Right.
And so that felt awkward.
Yeah. Well, and I think we talked a little bit about this immediately after the movie too, but just the pacing as a whole, we mentioned the bus montage, and then you get like, okay, we need to find the second vault key. walk in, Kate Blanchett turns a corner. Hey, here's the second vault key. It's like, that feels like something that you could have made into a, like, you're setting it up like that's going to be a bigger part of the movie. I
think I literally said it. Yo, first box, the first box she checked.
Literally.
And they have a reason for that in the film, I guess, but it's still
boring.
You could have done more with that scene, certainly.
And I will say, I did read that it was the original cut was finished over 2 years ago, and then they had to do, the studio messed with it because they wanted it to be PG-13 instead of R-rated. So like, I'm sure that did not help the pacing. But even so, it just feels very bland.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that making this an R-rated film actually would help it all that much.
Yeah, it was like, I don't think that would have changed the story at all.
Yeah.
It just would have changed the amount of blood that you could have shown when there was fights.
And those fight scenes are incredibly boring. I mean, it is people streaming into a room and getting shot. Like, I mean, it looks like a video game.
It's not even smart fighting. Like, they're like streaming in and they're over top. There's like one part where they have like this vat of acid, super acid, and it's not the psychos, the super psychos, whatever they're called, the underground version.
Right, yeah.
And everyone's like, okay, Kevin Hart's about to die. And I'm like, why is Kevin Hart not shooting out the floor and letting them sink and get melted in the acid? And he never does. I'm like, this is so boring.
I mean, it's been a long time since I've played a Borderlands game. I feel like that would make sense if that's the way that like shooting or like combat happened in those games. If it felt like a sort of Left 4 Dead where you were just like hordes and hordes of enemies. But I don't think that's the way that those games work.
It doesn't seem to be. I went home and read the wiki page, and it doesn't seem to be that way as far as I could tell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's less of a horde type game than it's a looter shooter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the looter shooter. It's not the first one, but it's the one that popularized the genre. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm always a little weird when films are like, we have to make it look and feel like you're playing the video game, because I don't feel like that ever really works in the transition to film. I mean, there's the first person scene in the Rock Doom movie where, it just moves to a first person perspective of someone walking down a hall shooting monsters. And you're like, that's kind of cool in that you did it, but it's not actually very good in a movie.
Yeah.
That's a cute 5 seconds. Now please give me back my film.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, it's just it's not a fun movie. Even in being bad, it can't be fun, right? And so like,
I fully expected that we were going to go, and I was like, okay, we're the only people here, so we can absolutely just like Mystery Science Theater the whole thing. And like, we barely talked during it even, because it was just, there wasn't anything to talk about for it during it. So
there's a lot of movies like, the Street Fighter film or the Super Mario Brothers film that I feel like have found like a new fandom in recent years, where people have gone back and reevaluated those films and said, hey, like these movies, like I don't think anybody thinks those movies are legitimately good, but I think a lot of people think they're fun and they're like goofiness and weirdness.
Charm was the right word, Mario.
And
so they've got a charm to them that,
like, you watch this film and it has, like, I don't think anybody will ever go back and reevaluate this film. There's just nothing in here that's goofy or weird enough to make it worth anyone watching.
Yeah, I think they wanted Jack Black to be is it Claptrap?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's like, no, he's just annoying. He's like the worst of like, I think about, when you think about Disney versus Pixar versus DreamWorks tends to go for more of the gross out humor than the other two do. And it's like, he's basically the bad DreamWorks character of this movie.
Yeah. I think he's more annoying than he is funny. He's supposed to be the comic relief, and he's more annoying than he is funny.
Yeah.
And, like Jack Black can run into that territory at times, like if he's not used appropriately. And here they're using him like really inappropriately, mostly because he just never shuts up. He's like constantly talking through the whole film, and you're like, just shut up.
Yeah.
Like, I know that's part of the game, but like it just doesn't translate as well to film. And actually, I found the Borderlands games, like the writing in them, to get annoying after a while. So, I guess maybe in that way they're accurate to the games.
There you go. That's their win. That's what's getting it up to 9%.
Yeah. So look, we suffered, so you don't have to. So if you're listening to this, do not watch the Borderlands film.
Even if it's just on TV for free, don't waste the hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Go watch Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, this is one. Yeah. If you think it looks like a good Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff, it is not. Just rewatch one of the Guardians films instead. All right. That does it for, I guess, what we've been watching. What have you been playing, Alicia?
So I haven't played a whole lot of video games this week with orientation and all that, but I did beat the main game of the Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice game. I still have the DLC case, but I beat the main game, and oh my gosh, these games. I was talking with my sister about it, and I know I have been rambling a lot of recent episodes about how incredible these games are, but I think one of the things that makes them so incredible to me is how well written of mystery visual novels they are, in terms of there are, of course there's always reveals every case, but it does such a good job of giving you enough hints to figure out the reveal before the characters, but not so far before the characters that you're annoyed at them the whole rest of the game. Mm-hmm. There's a character who you find out has been in disguise as another character, and you learn that during part 2 of the trial. I think I figured it out during, the 3rd of 4 investigation parts. So it's like I figured it out like an hour and a half before the characters did, but it's done so well where it's like they give you those hints so you can figure it out, but you're not figuring it out in case 1 and case 2, where you're just spending the whole rest of the game being like, oh my gosh, you idiots. Which is really great for me, because I 98% of the time I love being that person who calls the plot twists, and then there's that 2% of the time where you just figure it out from the very first moment of a movie or show or whatever, and then I'm annoyed that I can't shut off calling the plot twists. So I think that Spirit of Justice does the best job of that in the entire series. I still overall think that the first trilogy is my favorite, just because I do like Phoenix better than I like Apollo, but I think that this game does the best job of dropping hints for those mysteries throughout to help you solve it just a beat before the characters do.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool.
So, I mean, you don't have to sort of list them off all entirely, but so you've played through all 6.
Yep, I've played
those 2 trilogies.
Yep, Ace Attorney, Justice for All, and Trials and Tribulations are the original trilogy, and then it's Apollo Justice, Dual Destinies, and Spirit of Justice.
Can we get a ranking of 1 through 6?
Ooh,
unless that would take a long time.
That might take. I'll bring that back next episode.
Well, what is number 1? What's number 1 of the 6? It's just OG.
I think the first game, the very first game, just because it was such a delightful surprise with how well everything came together in the end. I think Trials and Tribulations is probably number 2 for how well everything came together as the trilogy. And then probably Spirit of Justice is number 3 for me.
That's the one you just finished?
That's the one I just finished, yeah. And then
that's a pretty good ranking, the top 3.
Yeah.
I guess a little bit murkier when you get down to the bottom of a ranking.
Yeah, I'm like, I guess I would put Dual Destinies 4, and then Justice for All and Apollo Justice are kind of tied, just because those 2 both had one case that was dragging on and didn't tie back in at all, and I was very annoyed the whole time. But yeah.
Cool.
I think that's my ranking so far. So
all
now, once I beat the DLC case, then I get to go on to the Great Ace Attorney, and that'll be fun.
All right, we'll have you update your rankings then.
Yep.
Mario will put you on the spot again.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
A little bit of Pokemon Go here and there, but that's been the big one.
All right. Mario.
Same thing. Haven't played a ton, but over the past few weeks, friends and I have been talking about finding a new game for us all to speedrun. I think everybody was kind of like, oh, they were going to find their own games. And I tried to convince them, but I think they were kind of already on board of us finding the same game, so that we could, race it together and learn it together and stuff like that. Because we did that, probably late 2022. That's probably wrong, but anyways, with Super Mario 64 for 16 star. And I think we have landed for this new game on Super Mario 64 for 70 star. And so yesterday, kind of spur of the moment, we had been talking, oh, we'll do something this weekend. We'll do a 70 star race of very scuffed, not really learning it, just get 70 stars, but like no real routing or practicing or anything like that. We did that. We ended up doing that yesterday. And I mean, like, I knew that I was not going to be very good at finishing that. My goal was 2 hours. It took a little over, I think, 2 hours and 4 minutes or something like that.
There you go.
That's just a long race in terms of like that first time. I know it would get better. And then we did a few 16 star races as well, which was fun because it's been probably over a year since any of us have really played that. And as it goes with speedrunning, you haven't played it in forever. And I got the best time that I've ever gotten in that game.
What is your PB?
So for 16 star yesterday, it was like 25 minutes and 17 seconds or something like that.
Nice.
But yeah, that's kind of it. And so I imagine we'll probably be doing that, learning that game. I think a friend who finished in first had like an hour and 40 minutes in 70 star. I don't know. I mean, none of us are, going to grind it to like try and get a good time in terms of like competitive times, because the competitive times are like under 45 minutes. None of us are going to get to that. But I think I feel like if I could get it under like an hour and a half, which probably wouldn't be too difficult, I would be pretty satisfied with.
How many total stars are there in that game?
120. But
Okay, that's what I thought.
You need, without like clipping through doors, you need 70 in order to beat it. So there's the like infinite staircase at the very top of the castle. If you don't have 70 stars, that will just go on forever. Unless you BLJ, backwards long jump up it. But you need 70, but you can clip through doors with 16.
Okay. So why not do the full 120? Why do 70?
I think I would not really want to do 120. I think just because some of those stars are just tough. And I think especially having not learned the majority of them, even like I've watched a number of 70 star speedruns, but I think as we've talked about a number of times, watching somebody do something and then trying to recreate it for yourself is like a lot easier said than done.
Sure.
Wow.
And so like I think I had even watched one earlier that day. And like, so I was just like, oh, I'll just try my best to follow whatever route that they did. And there were certain stars that I was like, nope, I'm not going to do this one. I will go find a slower, easier star to finish. And I think that's when I got to like 67. And I was just like, just give me a couple freebies. I don't care how long they take. But I think, maybe at some point 120, but I think that is a game for me, at least, Super Mario 64, that wears on me very quickly. I kind of can't believe we did, I think, 3 16-star races and the 70-star. I kind of can't believe I played it that many times yesterday. Because like I said, I feel like it just wears really fast. And maybe it's just because speedrunning in general is really frustrating. But yeah, maybe someday, but not. I would have to get a lot better at that game before I would want to do a 120 star.
Sure. No, I mean, that's a game I think we've talked about before. Like you said, going back and playing it, you like you still it has made you like that game more or respect it more?
Oh, absolutely. I have a ton of, I hold it in very high regard. I would put it up there. I mean, this is not a hot take by any means, but as maybe the second best Nintendo 64 game, only behind Ocarina of Time. I think probably a lot of people would put it very high up there, maybe not second, but I don't
But
think
at
that's
least top 5. I think for a lot of people.
I think it would be high up there. It's probably the most recognizable Nintendo 64 game, if not Ocarina of Time. But yeah, I mean, I do think that game is really good. It's just the way that Mario moves, if you're not used to it, and sometimes even if you are, it can be really frustrating. The camera can be really frustrating. So, and I think that's just kind of a not bad design. That's just what games were at that point in time.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the thing you have to recognize most is that they were doing something that like no one had ever done before with that game as a 3D sort of platformer.
Yeah, and like not just that somebody hadn't done before, but like nobody was able to do better for a very long time after that game came out. Like, I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, like we sort of take it for granted now that 3D action games have good cameras. Like you rarely run into a 3D action game these days that has a terrible camera. But at that time, like everybody else who was trying to sort of mimic and copy Mario 64 just had horrendous cameras. I mean, even something like Tomb Raider, right? Like that game is just constantly fighting with the camera. Those original Tomb Raider games on the PlayStation. So, yeah.
That is a big joke. I think especially with Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine is just maneuvering the camera is like half of the battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sunshine is, to me, the one Mario game that should get remade because they might actually make it into a really good game if they remade it.
That was one of the races that I had mentioned that we did last week for that game event was Super Mario Sunshine. And I was like, I won't bring it up because I know Justin will have feelings about that game. And I've already talked long enough, but that is a game. We'll talk about it some other time.
I mean, there's good things in that game.
Sure.
There's just a lot of bad stuff in that game too, which is weird for a Mario game. Okay, is that it, Mark?
Yeah, basically that.
All right. So I've been pretty busy this week, and so I haven't had a ton of time to play stuff, but I did play Thank Goodness You're Here. I think I mentioned it last week that I started it. So this is the sort of a British adventure game where you're a little guy going through a small British town, and you are... Yeah, it's very much an adventure game. It's, hey, I need my screwdriver. This guy down at the river has it, and you have to go do that. But while you're on your way to the river, there's all these other things that you're running into that you have to solve first. It's really light on the puzzles. Like there are puzzles in the game, but the puzzles aren't overly taxing. So this isn't something like an old school Sierra Online adventure game where you're going to get stuck and like have no idea what to do for like 10 hours. Like it all sort of flows pretty easy. If you kind of just poke around, eventually you'll figure out what it is you're supposed to do. But like the real star here is the animation and the jokes and everything. And I think I said last week that it is the rare game that has actually made me laugh. And so like there are moments in this game where I have laughed out loud, which almost never happens in a video game. There's really like kind of smart jokes in there, and that I kind of hate to spoil any of the jokes, but like there's like jokes where, you know, you're following a pipe underground, and you know you go through this space and you end up in somewhere where you're not really sure where you are, and there on the wall is a sign about liminal spaces, and you're like, oh, that's pretty clever. Like they kind of know what they're doing here, and it's all voice acted, and so like they've gotten like professional voice actors to come in and do this, and it really shines. I think your love of Monty Python or a British sort of comedy will determine to a great deal how much you enjoy this game. Like that sort of British comedy, sort of, stiff upper lip sort of comedy doesn't resonate with you, then this game probably won't resonate with you, because the real attraction here is the humor. And it gets into some pretty, like, it starts off pretty grounded and then gets more bizarre as it sort of goes along. And I think I've compared it to Ren and Stimpy before. It goes more in that direction as the game goes along into, hey, this is sort of surrealist what's going on at this point. But like, it is the probably best story in a game I've played this year. Like, it is the most fun I've had with the story of a video game of anything I've played this year, and it's a fairly short experience, like it's a few hours. So, it's hard to quantify like what's the value in that, because it's about a $20 game. So, is it worth $20 to play a 3-hour game? Like, I think that's sort of up to individuals. I think it's worth it because there's nothing else quite like this out there right now. Really to compare it to anything, you kind of have to go back to, old style adventure games. You have to go back to something like the Lucasfilm games of, I think I've mentioned before, some of those Lucasfilm games.
You had mentioned like Monkey Island before.
Yeah, Adventures of Monkey Island, stuff like that. So those would be my comparison point for it. And if you like those style games, I think you'll like this. But again, you can play this entirely with a controller. So again, it's not so much I'm collecting items and having to like figure out where this item goes and this item and combining these items. It's much more streamlined than that. But yeah, I mean, there are things I want to talk about with this game, but I hate to talk about them because there'll be spoilers for the game. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the joy and charm of the game is finding those things for yourself. So yeah, I highly recommend it. But again, sort of take that with a grain of salt about if that sounds like your style of game or not.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know we've talked about it a few times, even just this year. I think it, particularly as it compares to last year, these like hidden gems that have kind of come out and really surprised us in very good ways for the games that have come out this year.
Yeah, I mean, after last year where it was like big AAA game after big AAA game just hitting, I mean, to the point that some of those got lost in the shuffle, right? Mm-hmm. Like there were big AAA games that just got completely lost last year. And for this year to be, not that there aren't any AAA games, but there's a whole lot more of these smaller indie games that I feel like are shining this year. Mm-hmm. And so like this is one I'd put right up there with, with like Balatro or something. Like if you have $20 and you're wanting something kind of different to play, this is, I think, completely worth like checking out for that. All right, let's move on to the news. So there's a rumor going around that Microsoft is going to announce another port to PlayStation 5. So another one of their Xbox games coming over to PlayStation. There's been quite a bit of debate about what that might be. Some people think it's Forza, since there was a new Forza game last year that might be coming over to PlayStation, or one of the Forza Horizon games might be coming over. There's also, Starfield, Hellblade 2 came out this year and kind of died almost immediately, lost all of its kind of, I guess, like hype around it pretty quickly. And so people think like, well, that's the sort of game you would want to port to other systems, right? Because you want to get as many sales as you possibly can out of that, since it's obviously not performing at the level that you want it to. Even people saying that it might be one of the Halo games coming over. I don't know. Starfield, Hellblade 2 seem to make the most sense to me as games that would probably make a whole lot of sense to port over to other systems, and you're not really losing a lot in the Xbox ecosystem by those games getting ported over.
Yeah, Starfield was the first one that came to mind, and I think like as almost like a second release, like this game didn't hit the way that we wanted it to, or perhaps expected it to, And so here's like, we're, kind of run it back, give people another chance to, boot it back up for the Xbox players, and then for PlayStation players, give them a chance to play it for the first time, and maybe almost have this like second wind that could give it a sort of resurgence.
And they have new DLC coming out for that game. It's now been out for over a year on Xbox, so that there's some logistical sense to that, where that would make sense. So, no word official yet on what that might be. Maybe it won't actually happen, but so let's see. Former Game Informer editor-in-chief Andrew Reiner was appearing on the Min-Max podcast, kind of getting interviewed about his experiences with Game Informer. And as part of that, he mentioned that there might be some interest in reviving Game Informer, that there was somebody potentially talking, I guess, to GameStop about buying those assets so that they could bring Game Informer back in some form or fashion. He made clear it was not him. He was not directly involved in that, but like he was aware of some talks happening. So nothing official again on that, but like maybe a chance. We talked about this last week, I believe it was, when this shut down, that wind in, somebody come in and buy it, wind in, GameStop try to sell it. It looks like this might be a case of, well, it's happening, it's just happening late.
Yeah, that would make sense. I feel like you said, obviously this is all just him hinting at it, but that feels like what I would expect, because I said last week I was shocked that nobody tried to buy it or that they didn't try to sell it. So
yeah, I mean, even just the name,
yeah,
sure,
at this point, after 30 years, that brand name carries some weight and value to it.
Yeah,
I think for me, whether they're putting out new stuff or not, I think I just would love to have that archive available for, research purposes, I guess, but just as like something to explore. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that would be very cool, and hopefully this does actually happen.
Yeah, one of the coolest things that I've seen people doing in recent years is an attempt to scan all these old video game magazines, right? So like Game Informer, but also your Game Pros and Electronics Game Monthly and all these sorts of publications. So there would be full scans of every single issue, and they'd be accessible easily online. So some of that's on the Internet Archive, but I also know the Video Game History Foundation, they actually went to the Game Informer offices and like scanned their magazines, every back issue they had. And so even something like that as an archive for historical purposes, for research purposes and everything is really valuable. But accessing that through a website designed to access it is a whole lot easier than going through the Internet Archive in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe something will come of that. We'll go ahead and jump down because there's another sort of revival story here. Retro GameWorks and Hi-Fi Rush IP have been acquired by Krafton. So we talked a lot about Hi-Fi Rush and the shutdown of that studio and everything. And again, why didn't Microsoft try to sell this and everything? Well, now those assets, those properties have been bought by Krafton. This is the company that owns PUBG. So to give you some context, this is the overarching company that owns PUBG. So they are buying it. They bought the IP rights to Hi-Fi Rush so they can make a new Hi-Fi Rush, and apparently are bringing over around 50 or so staff, so that they would be, essentially like able to transition into a sequel to Hi-Fi Rush now. So that's some good news this week for a change.
That's really exciting. Because, that's one that we talked about so much last year as one of those sort of hidden gems, which also makes sense because it was released the day that it was announced. There was no real hype for it, but that we really delivered. That was one of those first games, I think that came out, January-ish of last year?
Yeah.
And so to know that is not just going to be a one and done thing, hopefully. But that we will continue to get more is pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Valve has announced that it will support Steam OS. So this is the OS that runs on Steam Deck devices, that they will support Steam OS on the ROG Ally and other handhelds. So up until now, like if you wanted to have the Steam Deck experience, you had to actually go buy a Steam Deck. So now Valve is saying we're going to make this available. There have been some hackers who had sort of hacked together a version that would run on other devices, but like Steam is just going to release it publicly. So if you buy another one of these handheld, gaming computers, that you can install the Steam Deck software on there, and basically it'll run like a Steam Deck. That's the promise, right? Like maybe there'll be hiccups along the way and everything, but Valve is pretty good about supporting that sort of stuff. So
I'll say I'm sure there'll be hiccups when it first happens, just because there's always going to be. But if they're promising to support it, they'll fix those hiccups hopefully. And
right. And I think the bigger story here is this was always the plan from Valve's perspective, right? Like Valve does not necessarily want to be a hardware manufacturer.
Yeah,
like
sure.
they're a services company. And so, like they built the Steam Deck because the Steam Deck was a way to get more people into the Steam ecosystem and to get people in the Steam ecosystem buying more games.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the promise of this is, well, now we don't necessarily have to manufacture the hardware. ROG and all these other companies will go out there and produce the hardware, and they'll install our software, and we still get our 30% cut of every game that's sold on here. Mm-hmm. So you sort of understand from their perspective, like why they're embracing this so much, like, right? Like they don't have to worry about what the Steam Deck 2 looks like because maybe they don't even make the Steam Deck 2, or they don't have to be in such a rush to make it.
What was the Xbox line? Every screen is an Xbox. Every handheld is a Steam Deck. I as a sort of joke, I don't know if this is a good sign considering this. We haven't even started the semester. I was laughing because when I first read this, I didn't see this as OS. I just saw O, and I thought there was an apostrophe that this was Steamos. And so it's like, they're getting into like the SpaghettiOs type of business.
Or cereal.
Yeah,
like
exactly. And I was
cereal.
like, what the hell is this? And then I read it again and like, oh, okay, I guess that makes more sense.
There's a little Gordon Freeman action figure in every box.
Yeah.
Steam Deck SpaghettiOs.
Have you seen those boxes of cereal where it'll be like Nightmare on Elm Street cereal or something?
I've seen
the images of them.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually buy the cereal.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I've actually seen the cereal, but I've seen images of.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like I think they have Chucky, like there's Chucky-O's or something.
Okay.
And it's a real box of cereal with something that resembles Cheerios in it.
Sure. Kind of along the vein of like a Count Chocula or Frankenberry or whatever.
Yeah. And so they do these for different brands and everything, like classic films and that sort of thing. So yeah, Steamos, I could actually imagine them making that. You get a free random game in each box.
Oh, and you could like make it with like the Steam logo is like already kind of a circle with like a thing inside of it. There you go.
That can be the marshmallows, like how Lucky Charms have.
Exactly. Valve, you're welcome.
Valve, send us $1 billion.
We
you
want
have it
our
just
cut.
lying around.
I promise that's worth at least like $47.
Man, those boxes of cereal, like I was going to buy my sister a box because they had something that I thought she would find funny. And I was in, I think it was an FYE store. And those boxes were like $20 a box. I was like, I know cereal's gone up, but this is insane. Like, who's paying $20 for this?
Oh, now I'm thinking like, you can get boxes of cereal and they'll be like, oh, like get a movie ticket for whatever. Right. All of them are tickets to go see Borderlands.
Oh, man, that's just, oh man, is the cereal itself poison? That's a horrible gift.
That's going to be like this generation's E.T. video game.
Literally.
It's a landfill of Steamos.
Along those same lines, so Valve announcing quite a bit of news here. They are also releasing Windows drivers for Steam Deck. So again, hackers have made it so that you can install Windows onto your Steam Deck. But the problem was that, it's using custom hardware and everything. It's not like a standard mouse or anything. So you needed drivers to make sure that would work in Windows in the way that a player would expect it to work in Windows. So they are releasing official drivers now. So the point being that if you have a Steam Deck, you should be able to install Windows and everything work basically the way that you would expect it to work. And the question is, well, why install Windows on a Steam Deck? You already have the Steam Deck interface. Well, there are some things that are kind of a burden to jump through hoops to get working on a Steam Deck. So if you want the Epic Games Store or the Xbox Game Pass app from Windows and want those games to play on your Steam Deck, there are ways to do that through the Linux interface, but maybe it's easier, more straightforward for people using Windows. Mm-hmm. So now you'll be able to do that a little bit easier. So again, Valve making all of this just easier and work more for consumers, which is, we don't see that always. So thumbs up to them. Let's see. Prime Video is teaming with Tim Miller and the Blur Studios, the people who made Love, Death, and Robots, if you've seen that on Netflix, for adult animated anthology Secret Level. So they're expecting a big announcement later this month to sort of roll this out and everything, but they're talking New World, Spelunky, and other PlayStation titles would appear as part of this animated anthology. So New World is the Amazon-developed role-playing game. Spelunky is the sort of indie darling game and everything. But other PlayStation games would also appear. They've also apparently signed a deal with Sony. So, this is probably not maybe Kratos and that sort of thing or Uncharted, because maybe Sony wants to save those for big movies.
Or maybe like
we
Sly
got to
Cooper.
get the Mark Wahlberg sequel.
Right. Yeah. But I think Sly Cooper is exactly the type of property this would work for, right? Like,
am I finally getting it? Remember we were supposed to get a Sly Cooper movie in 2016? Am I finally getting this?
Yeah, I was like, a Sly Cooper cartoon would be very cool. I mean, I know
It'd be
this wouldn't work for this, but I think the other one that, it's old at this point, but like a Parappa the Rapper type of thing.
Yeah.
Those feel like they would fit really well. So that's very cool.
And you're doing this as an animated anthology, right? So you're not making a big commitment to anything. So you could do Parappa the Rapper because you do one episode. What have you lost, right, in the process? And I think also something like Sly Cooper, you get to see is there interest in doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Does this work? Can we spin this off into a Sly Cooper series? Mm-hmm. This sort of reminds me of the Saturday Supercade. So you're both too young to remember this, but back in the 80s, CBS on Saturday mornings had something called the Saturday Supercade, and they had a cartoon block, and it was like Donkey Kong and Q*bert and Space Ace and several different arcade video games that all had cartoons as part of it. And this kind of reminds me of that in that, let's throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And maybe one of these feels really good, translate it. And something like Sly Cooper already looks and feels and sort of plays like a cartoon. Yeah. So you could see that making that transition particularly well over maybe some other things.
Yeah,
Parappa the Rapper also, right? That feels like a cartoon.
Well, I mean, we talked so much about PlayStation with the more family friendly sort of titles or IPs that they haven't utilized those as much recently. But something like that, something like a Parappa the Rapper, something like a Little Big Planet.
Like Echo the Dolphin.
Sure, these are things that feel like they would fit well in this sort of format. So it would be exciting to see that if it works out, not only might we get, maybe an extended series of it, maybe you'd start seeing more games in those series as well. So that's, if that ends up being the case, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a hit cartoon of Sly Cooper, then all of a sudden there's a really good argument to make something that those fans can buy, right? And whether that is some sort of, another remaster of those original games, or it is
it's been 10 years since Sly 4.
Yeah, or an entirely new game in that series. My understanding for a lot of these companies is they need some sort of proof before they can commit to putting money behind one of these games, right? They need proof that there is a fan base there to sell this. And so that's what a lot of these reissues are about. Like, we're going to reissue this or this remaster. So we're going to see does this sell. And if it sells, then that's justification for us to go to our bosses and say, let us make a new game in this franchise. And I think cartoons, movies, other transmedia sort of stuff does the same sort of like position there.
Yeah, and I imagine that's the case with how expensive games have gotten to make. I mean, again, we talked about that so much last year. And not that I expect any of these to cost what Spider-Man cost to make, but
right.
there's still going to be a significant investment, and so you want to be able to make all that back. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting a $300 million Sly game anytime soon.
Could you imagine?
That would be incredible.
Look, an open world Sly game where you can break into any building and rob it, like that'd be pretty cool.
That would be incredible. I also don't expect it.
Like Sony really lean into that. Like, Hitman has been a huge franchise. Like, take that and apply it to Sly. Like, have Sly Cooper snapping people's necks. Let's see. 2 Point Museum has been announced. So this is part of the 2 Point series. So 2 Point Hospital, then they did 2 Point University.
I feel like I remember you talking about 2 Point University.
Yeah, I played it
way back when we first started the podcast.
Yeah, it's been a while. I really liked Hospital quite a bit. So it was sort of like a spiritual successor to Theme Hospital, which is like a game from the 90s on the computer. And so they did this sort of spiritual, sequel to it in 2 Point Hospital. And then they did a university one. And I just never really got into the university one. I don't know what that says about the quality of the game. I don't think the game was particularly bad. I think it was every bit probably as good as the Hospital
that's
one.
your offline life.
Right, yeah.
This was your power wash simulator.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Look, you play 2 Point Hospital. It's very clear. This is not how that works. It's a very goofy, silly game. It is, somebody needs to...
Sure.
Somebody needs to get their X-rays, and you go in and it lights up the entire room and everything. It's that's part of the charm.
But does a dog eat the heart that's supposed to be a transplant for somebody?
No, I don't think they had that gag in there, but that would have been really funny because, man, what a beautiful scene from a television show.
These are similar to a roller coaster tycoon thing where you're building... not a theme park, but a hospital.
They're management sims.
Sure.
Think, that's a roller coaster tycoon, Sim City, even, so
you just unlocked core memories by bringing up Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Well, Roller Coaster Tycoon's a fantastic game. Those first two, at least. I didn't like 3 as much, but those first two are fantastic. So yeah, they are kind of working their way through, I guess, all the different places you could set this. A museum sounds like potentially a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
You're thinking there's going to be some night at the museum type hijinks in here.
I would hope so.
Those games are very goofy and funny. That's the charm of them. So I am excited to see this. But yeah, I never played as much of University as I probably should have. And again, I don't know why. That very well may be this is my fun time. This is my away from university time. The last thing I want to do when I'm playing a video game is think about what I do during the day.
Please don't remind me about the Chancellor.
I feel no, this is my vision. Bring this to I was gonna say Sandy, Rebecca. This is what we could be. Justin, calm down.
I feel like Rebecca may be calling the counseling services on me. I'm no, see, the students go in here, and if they don't perform well, it shoots them out the window.
I do know better.
The day that Justin becomes department chair.
Hairs all
We got the full.
Ancient Aliens, dude.
Yeah.
The day that Justin becomes chair, it's going to all become 2 Point University.
Hey, that's going to be my management software. Like when you are like uploading grades, it's going to be through that game. Yeah, but that does sound fun. Like, I think a museum is a smart way to go with that. I mean, I think the other way they could go is with a theme park, but there's so many games that have tried to recapture that roller coaster tycoon. And really, theme park, which was, Theme Hospital was kind of its contemporary. This seems like smart. Don't try to do what everyone else is doing. Go a different direction. Do a museum.
Yeah.
Let's see. Developers have been told not to expect the Switch 2 before April 2025. So I think what actually they were told is not to expect it until second quarter of 2025. And so the first quarter runs through March. So it would be April 2025 would be the earliest that the Switch 2 could launch. I think a lot of people were expecting March because that's when the original Switch launch was in March of the year. So when it got pushed from releasing this year, a lot of people thought, they're going to push it to spring and release it then. It now sounds like it's going to be a little later than that, most likely. But, that could be anywhere from March or April through the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
So Tokyo securities analyst Hideki Yasuda believes that the next Switch will be released in the first half of 2025. This is a separate story, not related to the previous one, which could mean between April and July and would cost under $500. All right, so the under $500, it better sure as hell.
Yeah.
That feels like a slam dunk prediction.
Yeah.
That sounds like
I hope
an easy one. I can't imagine them going over the PlayStation 5 price.
This will cost less than $3,000.
I'm an analyst. Give me money. I think the other thing, right, like him saying that this would be the first half of 2025, that still seems to be what most people expect, that this will not fall until fall of 2025, that it will be in that first half of the year sometime. I think that makes a whole lot of sense.
It gives you time to have it at full price and then mark it down for Black Friday.
Sure.
Yeah.
New console for the summer.
Or even just restock it.
Yeah.
Or for the Christmas season, right? Like I feel like if you release that in November, let's say, it sells out and then there's a lot of people who can't get it for Christmas. But if you release it in April, it sells out and then you get enough back in by Christmas for those non-early adopters.
Yeah.
Right. The kids are going to ask for this as a Christmas present. They're not going to go out and buy it with their own money.
Yeah.
Which was me for most of my life.
I was like, and even me right now, I'm like, I can get something nice at Christmas. Yeah. But if it's sold out at Christmas, I'm not going to be like, it's back in stock in January. Let me go get it. I'm going to wait until Christmas.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, but most of my life, like I would have to get a console at Christmas. Like I wasn't getting a console like in February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think the Switch is the only console I've ever bought myself rather than getting a Christmas present. And that's because it was an impulse post-breakup buy.
I mean, that is...
Sounds like a great decision.
Yeah.
It was.
I think that's the best post-breakup recovery that I can imagine, a Switch. I'm not even saying that as a joke. I mean that gives you something to do, distract you, like you don't think about things. So I think this makes a whole lot of sense. I think pushing it to the fall, you just run into that issue. So release it in the spring, let people like me who will probably go out and buy this around launch, buy it, let it sell out, and then you can pump more into the system by Christmas. And that way they're on store shelves by Christmas, where you can just walk in and buy one. You're not having to use, the online notification system says in stock on Amazon at 2 a.m. You have to buy it right now.
So you're not having the PS5 problem.
Right.
You have to sign up for a Walmart premium member just to get dibs
get into
on
a lottery for it. I think that's what they were doing with the PlayStation 5s.
What I mean, we're sort of teasing, but what do you expect a cost for this to be?
I don't think it comes any cheaper
I'll
than
say
the current Switch.
The Switch was $300.
I was going to say, do we think 300, 350?
I think probably $350 and then gets marked down to $300.
So the current Switch is still at $300. It's never had a permanent price drop. The OLED Switch is $350. So if they release it for $300 or $350, then you have to assume they're going to drop the prices of the current Switches.
Yeah.
Right? And it would have to be a significant price drop. Like you would have to drop it, a good $50 or more for both of those. I think it's more likely that this comes in at $400.
Yeah, I didn't realize the OLED was at $350.
I thought the OLED was cheaper.
It has been. Like you've been able to get the OLED for like $320 on sale and stuff, but like I think its standard manufacturer suggested price is still $350.
Okay.
So I think we still might get a price cut on the old Switch because they're chasing that PlayStation 2 console number still.
Yeah.
So I think it makes a lot of sense to drop the price on the current Switch and like you'll move some more of those. But I think, Nintendo has in recent years we are not selling our hardware at a loss. We are going to make a profit on day one, which is not how console sales have traditionally worked at all.
But it's worked out for them.
Oh, yeah. It works fantastic for them. And so they're making quite a bit of profit off of every Switch they sell now. So it is always easier to drop your price later than to raise it. Like we saw the blowback against Sony for doing that and the Meta Quest and all that. So I don't think they come in below 400 on this. I don't know that they go higher. I can't imagine them trying to sell it at 500, but I also don't think they go lower.
I think it would have to be a heck of a machine to sell it at 500.
Yeah. Well, I think with the comparison point of the OLED being 350, 400 makes sense.
I mean, everything people have been saying is they're expecting this to come in about the power level of a PlayStation 4 Pro. So like selling that at 500, even as a portable, is going to be a hard argument in another year.
Yeah.
Because in another year, like the PlayStation 5 will have been out, 4 years? I believe.
Something close to that.
So like, I mean, then you're like selling at the same price, but you're selling for a system that's, almost 8 years old at that point, 7 or 8 years old for the Pro. I just can't imagine them trying that, but Nintendo's done weird stuff before. So I think 500 is a very safe, like you said, that's a very safe bet. Like it coming in above 500 would be an insane thing from my perspective. Let's see. Valve's hero shooter Deadlock has been revealed. So I think this originally revealed because somebody writing for The Verge basically did a big splashy story because they're in the beta for this. And apparently the beta doesn't, generally when you get into betas, like I think Christina talked about when she was in a beta.
So are you supposed to sign an NDA?
Yeah, you sign an NDA. They did not have people sign NDAs. When you booted the game, it said, hey, don't talk about this.
Oh, geez.
Please?
Yeah,
Please?
I mean, basically that was it. Like, hey, don't talk about this. And so that's not an NDA.
No.
Like, that's not legally binding.
And somebody's going to see that and be like, no, I'm going to get the scoop.
So one of the writers for The Verge just basically blabbed this everywhere and posted a story onto their website and with images and everything. And Valve banned them from the game.
I would have if I was Valve too, to be fair, but
but I mean,
you also didn't make them sign an NDA,
So, anyways, this has been sort of an open secret that they were working on this game, and I mean, it's kind of interesting. Valve does not make a whole lot of games anymore, so to see them making a new game and they have the ability to get behind this in the way they do Dota 2 and Team Fortress. Like this potentially could be stiff competition for other games coming out soon, especially when you look at something like Concord.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just thinking. I was like, it's an interesting genre to get into, but maybe not. I mean, I don't know what the other big sort of hero shooter is right now. I think is Valorant. Kind of comes to the top of my head.
And Overwatch.
And Overwatch, but I feel like Overwatch 2 doesn't seem like it hit the way that Overwatch 1 did.
Nope.
Yeah.
Not nearly as popular. So maybe they, I mean, I'm sure they've been planning this for however long, but maybe there's room in that genre to get a foothold.
Well, not for all these games, obviously,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So Concord, Marvel Rivals,
I forgot about Marvel.
Deadlock, like somebody's going to have to fall off.
I feel like I saw somewhere that Concord was a little disappointing, but I can't say where I saw that in whatever sort of early access weekend that they did.
I think that's been the general consensus that it's, like not a terrible game, but like maybe not enough to keep an audience glued to it. I guess we didn't talk about this last week, but we can talk about it along with this story, that there has also been rumors that they're working on something Half-Life related. So people have looked at some resumes online, some people working at, I think it was a voice actress, had updated her page and said that she was working on a project with Valve. And the name was, I think it was like White Sands was the name of the project, which is obviously a code name for it. And that people who are big into the lore of Half-Life were like, oh, no, this relates to Half-Life. And then that voice actress like took her page down. And then when it went back up, that was no longer listed on her credits. So this does not seem to be Deadlock related. This seems to be a different project. People are jumping to conclusions. This is a new Half-Life project. We don't know that. But obviously people are so desperate for any Half-Life news, they'll jump at anything. But apparently Valve is working on another game, whatever that might be. I do love that, like, all these projects get leaked by voice actors now. But it's voice actors not intentionally leaking it. It's them updating their resumes, which you're like, okay, that makes perfect sense. You would need to keep your resume updated and everything. But like, you can't because this is a secret project.
Yeah.
And
then you're like, okay, let me do the code name. No one's going to figure it out. Fans.
Well, and like this actress, you don't know how much does she know about the actual game, right? Like, do they bring her in and say, well, you're working on this game called White Sands and here's your lines. And is she being given, the full script? Is she being given just her lines? Is she being given any sort of context? Has she done voice work in other Half-Life games that made Half-Life fans look at her resume specifically and go, aha? Right.
The whole thing is hilarious, honestly, and fascinating.
Does she play video games? Because I feel like these sort of leaks happen on a fairly regular basis where somebody says, oh, I was doing something with Naughty Dog, and people are like, oh, this is proof of, they're doing a new Uncharted game. And it's like, this person doesn't know anything about video games.
That's very sort of the fans of Square Peg, some round hole, where we will make this fit.
Right. Yeah. So, that's not to make fun of her. Like,
no, not at all.
She's doing a job, right? Like, and
no, I genuinely think it's hilarious in a delightful way. Like, there's no harm done on anyone with this. It's just funny.
Yeah, no malice at all.
Yeah.
Like, at work. So, yeah, so we might be getting something new Half-Life related. We'll see how that develops. Let's see. Boss Team Games and Way Forward are making a new series called Retro Realms, which are retro-style games based on IP. They're starting with Halloween and Ash versus the Evil Dead. So Ash versus the Evil Dead is the series. I think it was Showtime that was on. Ran a few seasons. These are both 2D side-scrolling games, so they look very much sort of, people will say 8-bit, but they're really more kind of 16-bit, like in graphic fidelity. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Like, these are the sort of things, like, I don't know how great these games are going to be, and I don't know, like how much you can lean into the IP. Like, are you going to get Bruce Campbell to voice Ash? Because if not, what is the point? Like, does anyone care unless he's shouting out his quips as you play through the game? And I just don't know if there's a great deal of interest in that.
It's two interesting properties to start with like both of these being, I mean, horror genre films.
Right.
I think that those can both fit with games. I think they could both work really well, but it's interesting that both of them are. I don't know how different these games would play from one another.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that would be the only thing that kind of stands out, I guess.
The screenshots that they showed of the Halloween game made it look very much like you were playing as Michael Myers.
Interesting.
And so that's always been one of my issues. If, like, you go back and you play the old Halloween and Friday the 13th games, you're always playing somebody, or Nightmare on Elm Street. You're always playing somebody trying to kill the bad guy.
Yeah.
Right? Which makes it very difficult to make enemies in those games. So you end up like in Friday the 13th on the NES where like birds are attacking you. And you're like, well, this is stupid. Like, I'm not scared of birds. I'm scared of Jason Voorhees with a machete.
That's what. Sorry,
You have not watched Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
I was just gonna say, I think the one way you could do that is if you made it similar to like, what is that game? The Resident Evil 2 remake where you've got that dude sort of like
Mr. X.
Yeah, Mr. X like stalking you, or I think Lady Dimitrescu kind of does that in the new one. You've got sort of this like It Follows type of energy, like it's always behind, so you can't take too long on a particular level. Like I don't know if that's how those games have worked previously, but
right.
That to me is how you would do that. You would make it like a speed thing rather than I'm dodging obstacles rather than fighting off birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not to that level, but like the NES Friday the 13th game is that, in that like you are going and exploring the campground and you're like going into cabins and like, oh no, Jason is mysteriously in this cabin when you go into it and you have to like fight him. That's a really terrible game, but it's also a really interesting game because it was very different from a lot of things at that time. But yeah, I mean, these look like just standard side scrollers. So like they're probably not as interesting as that. But I mean, we'll see. I think it's interesting to make games out of these. I mean, we've already had an Evil Dead game that came out a couple years ago, but that was a sort of an online competitive game in the style of the Friday the 13th game. So
was it a few weeks ago, probably a few months ago at this point, was it Halloween that we had talked about as like just doing everything with like all these different properties now, just looking at this next door, or was that Jason?
I think that was Jason.
it was Jason.
Okay.
Because they like founded a new company to do that with.
Okay. I was just like, I know we had talked about one, and as I was saying, I was like, I don't think it was Halloween, but with both of these, at least what you're going to talk about next as well.
Yeah, so Christina is not here, and I feel like we are really doing a disservice by her not being here with her boy Mikey, because we have double the news. So like he is in Dead by Daylight. He's getting this sort of 16-bit retro game, but he is also getting a new Unreal Engine 5 powered game. So very like, we don't know what this game looks like, but very sort of cutting edge using the like latest game engine, right? And I think the most interesting thing about it is John Carpenter is involved with this game in some way. And for those people who don't know, John Carpenter, who, made the original Halloween, is a huge video game buff. Like if you go and you like read his social media accounts, it's just him basically talking about playing video games, watching the NBA and playing video games. That's all he does. He's like reverted to being a 14-year-old boy.
So can he get Jamie Lee Curtis in for a better video game IP than Borderlands movie?
Well, I mean, they did get her back for those last trilogy of Halloween films they did. He was involved with the music in those. So like that's what I suspect his involvement with these games, this game is going to be. He might be doing some of the music. Like those who don't know, he wrote the classic Halloween theme. He's in a band that He was in a band with, I think Stephen King was in the same band.
What?
All right.
Yeah, like I may be getting that confused. Maybe those are two separate bands.
I didn't even know Stephen King was in a band at all.
Oh yeah. And Stephen King, I think maybe that's a separate band. He's in a band with other like famous authors. And anyways, he still does music. Like I think he works with his son now. John Carpenter and his son like do music together. And so one of the bands is called the Coupe de Villes. I think that's John Carpenter's band. It's the Coupe de Villes.
Yeah, Stephen King was apparently part of the Rock Bottom Remainders, which was an American rock charity supergroup consisting of popular published writers.
Yeah.
Most of them also amateur musicians.
Which, I mean, look, if you're John Carpenter and you've made some of the best films of like the 70s and 80s, and then you can just go, like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I want to watch the NBA, play video games, and occasionally write music. That's a pretty good way to live out your life.
Yeah.
He also is the one that very famously they asked him what he think about them remaking all of his old films. And he's like, I don't care. I get a paycheck.
Sometimes that's a healthy attitude to have.
I'm like, good for you. You've embraced your old man status. You're a grumpy old man. Let's see. PlayStation Network seems to have leaked a port of Red Dead Redemption for PC. So this was an update onto the Red Dead Redemption page where it says it changed the text on the page, changed to say now available on PC for the first time. And so people have gone back and looked at like old versions of that page to make sure this wasn't just like a, where this had been wrong for a long time. And they went back and looked at March, and the text that's on there today is different than it was in March. So this seems like there is news about Red Dead Redemption. That game is now like 15 years old or so. So seeing it ported over to the PC seems like really out of date and out of time, but it's a fantastic game. So, I mean, good.
Yeah. Is the second one on PC?
Yes.
Okay.
The story I always heard is that the first one wasn't because they would have had to do extensive work to port it over.
I see.
And so I don't know if this is going to be a full-on sort of remake or remaster, or if this is going to be like the remasters they did of the Grand Theft Auto trilogy, which was terrible, that remaster a few years ago. They used AI in it, and it looked bad and everything. So I'm not entirely sure what this is going to amount to. Let's see. Pokemon actress Rachel Lillis has passed away at 46. She was the English voice actress for Misty and Jessie, and I think did some other voices as well, but those two major characters.
Yeah, she passed away from breast cancer. So it's so odd looking at this and seeing she was 46. Like,
that's young.
That's so young. And,
it's also really young when you think about that she's been doing these voices
she's been
for
doing
20
this for
years.
20, yeah.
She was younger than me when she
years.
started voicing like the two iconic characters of my childhood. Yeah, this one hits. I think not quite in the same way that like Kevin Conroy passing hit, but this definitely is like, okay, there was a long time where I just didn't watch the Pokemon anime because just time, and then I still have not been able to go back and watch Ash's final episodes and to like start watching Horizons because my emotions can't handle that. But I am like, there's one episode, and I think it was from Johto. Yeah, it had to have been because Wobbuffet was there. But it's one of the episodes that my mom still talks about remembering. And it's Princess Day, and it's the town that they're in. It's the day where the girls get everything and the boys basically have to be their servants. And there's a competition at the end where you can win this little doll set, and both Misty and Jessie really want it, and Misty wins it in the end. And so then like James and Meowth and Wobbuffet all like dress up as the characters for Jessie, and it's one of, you know, the episode as a whole is silly, but the ending is one of the most heartwarming. And so like that, again, with orientation this week and with other stuff going on, emotions have been all over the place, but that's something that I'm like, I want to sit down this weekend and rewatch that episode. Mm-hmm. And if you've got a bike, go ride your bike, because Misty did finally get hers back in the end, but go ride a bike. Go ride a bike for her.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is sort of interesting about this is just the impact that these voice actors have on an entire generation. Like I watched some of the Pokemon cartoon. I really have probably seen more of the movies than I have the actual show. But like it was not my like childhood, right? Like I was in college when like that really hit big, and so it's not as big a deal to me.
There's like, I cried when I met Veronica Taylor, who voiced Ash and May, and I cried when I met her and got her autograph.
Yeah, and so like when I talk to people, like, you know, this is a huge part of their childhood, and in a way that video game transmedia stuff hadn't been in the past, right? Like the ideal that it's not the Pokemon games, it's the Pokemon cartoon that is so important to, you know, really at this point, a couple of generations.
Yeah.
That have grown up with it. And so, you know, the ideal that the voice actress of, you know, two of the main characters would be so important. You know, not that anyone dying would be unimportant, but like would be so important to that group of young people who grew up with it. And, you know, many like yourself who are now full-grown adults, is, I think, really drives home the point of how much video games have sort of infiltrated the larger culture, right? Like it is, you know, whether it's the games themselves or the transmedia source stuff that we interact with, that video games have a very important part in the way that young people grow up, how they relate to the world, how they think about themselves in it, and that the people who are making these, either those very much behind the scenes, or in the case of Rachel, like much more sort of in front of the scenes with her voice, at least, like how much of an impact they have. And, you know, I think that's a great legacy to leave behind. You know, obviously we wish the best for her family and her friends as they mourn, but like, man, what a legacy to leave behind though. Like,
yeah.
And she did work on other like games and anime and different things. So, you know, she has quite an extensive resume. So rest in peace. So that's some sad news. Let's end here on some good news. We've been talking about this new Sonic Generations reissue that they're doing, sort of remake, which is Sonic X Shadow Generations. So this is actually really interesting to me, and I think, Alicia, you sent this originally.
Yep.
That when they issue that game this fall, they're going to pull the original Sonic Generations from sale, which makes sense. You don't want it out there causing potential confusion in the marketplace. If people are going to buy the new game, that's $60, and this old version's right next to it for $10. Obviously, a lot of people are going to buy that, maybe not even knowing the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So they're going to pull that. But there was quite a bit of fan outrage because there's, at least on the PC version, there's a whole lot of mods and work that's gone on behind the scenes on that game. And there's also preservationists who feel like, hey, we want games to forever be available, and this is a different version of the game. So Sega has said, well, okay, we're not going to pull it entirely. It's still going to be part of I think it's called the Sonic Legacy Pack.
Yeah, when they said I think that there's a couple of bundles that it's part of currently.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, it's when you buy, those bundles are still going to exist, and those are still going to come with the original Sonic Generations rather than Sonic X Shadow.
Yeah. So basically, when you go onto something like Steam, and there's going to be a pack of 3 or 4 old Sonic games, so you can imagine like Sonic Heroes and Sonic Forces, like
if only Sonic Heroes was, but yeah,
being part of one of these packs, right? Or Sonic 06 being part of one of these bundles, and that you would buy it, and that Sonic Generations this original version would still be part of those. They're not going to pull it from those bundles, which I think is this great compromise.
Yeah,
on their part.
And you brought up the mods. They also confirmed in that announcement that the mods will still work on Sonic Generations on PC, which is, above and beyond, in my opinion. I think the preservationist argument, I can also see from like the Sega company standpoint of, okay, yeah, we want to preserve that, but then like keeping the mods is really, we've seen it consistently that Sega listens to their fans and cares about their fans, and I think that is just phenomenal. Go Sega.
How many times can we say that with a straight face? Once.
No, the Yakuza games are Sega games. We can say that for those.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Excuse me, Like a Dragon?
Sure, yeah.
No, I do the same thing. That's the Yakuza series. I don't know that it'll ever change.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same thing I had trouble for a long time calling it Dragon Quest because it was Dragon Warrior to me. All right, that does it for news. Let's move on over into our big question. And our big question for this week is as we've talked about multiple times throughout this episode, it's been a busy week getting ready for classes. So what's your quick break game that you play when you have just a few minutes? So this question kind of comes from the idea that, yes, there are these games that we're playing, these bigger games that take up a huge amount of time and everything, but most people have those sort of comfort games that they go back to when they just have like, hey, I have 10 minutes and I need a brain break from the work that I'm doing. So what is your sort of comfort game, your brain break game that you like to go to? Mario, why don't we start with you?
Honestly, I don't really feel like I have one. Feel like I need one, but I don't feel like I really have one. I think, it would be maybe like in the past and maybe upcoming, it would be like just doing a quick run of like Super Mario 64, because that's 25 to 30 minutes. But, the quick little...
Balatron?
That's dangerous. I mean, I think I will go through phases of doing some of those like Wordle clones. I don't know what it's called. I can't think of it, but it was just like a trivia that they would do every day, and it would be like 9 different categories. It would be like 3 sports questions, 3 television movie questions, and 3 kind of random ones. So I would do that pretty often, but haven't done that in a long time. So I don't know. I'm in the market for a brain break game.
You hear that? If you have one to sell, Mario's buying. All right, Alicia, how about you?
Honestly, I think for me, it's Pokemon Go. I can sit and play it for hours, but I also, anytime I know I'm about to start walking somewhere, I'm like, okay, let me just pull it up real quick, pull my buddy up, maybe catch 1 or 2 of the Pokemon around me, and then get going.
All right. Yeah, I think for me, it's really the sort of New York Times games. So, the sort of classic ones, Wordle, the crossword connections. They have a new one called Strands. So I've been playing that a lot lately. And usually those are pretty easy because I can, first thing in the morning or late at night before I'm going to bed, I can pull that app up either on my phone or the iPad and just play through those fairly quickly. And they're like a good relaxing, and they sort of, make me think about games differently in a very sort of word focused manner instead of, some of the other skills I'm using in different games. But yeah, Strands is really a lot of fun. Strands is sort of like a word search, but everything's on on one topic. So it'll be something like, at the movies, and you'll have like I forgot what it is, like 7 words I think that will be in the crossword, but like one word goes the length of the entire puzzle, and so it'll either split it horizontally or vertically. It's in the Death Stranding series.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Kojima.
Yeah, thank you, Kojima, for giving me my brain break game.
Strand game.
That's a whole genre, right? Like Strand games are a genre. So, but like that game's really relaxing, and it's generally pretty. I don't know, easy is the right word, but like not too intense, right? Like it's not like trying to do the standard daily New York Times crossword where you're going to maybe get frustrated, depending on your skill level. I think it's approachable by most people, and it's a relaxing game. So those work generally pretty well for me. So yeah, I would recommend those. They're all in one app, and it's free. You can pay a subscription fee so that you get access to more puzzles, but you get a free puzzle every day. So for most people, you don't really need to subscribe. All right, that does it for this week's episode. What have we learned this week? We have learned, do not go see the Borderlands film, even as a goof. Even if the people you do a podcast with are like, hey, this will be fun, they are wrong.
We got content out of it.
I say.
We're embracing the content creation capitalist market.
We had fun talking about it. Just because the movie wasn't fun doesn't mean we didn't have fun.
I think we had more fun than maybe the people making the movie had. It really felt that way.
It really did.
Yeah, so skip that. But there's a lot of good games out there to play, and we are about to, in the next few weeks, hit September, and September is just like an out-of-control locomotive of great games coming out. So, we have the new Zelda game, we have Astro Bot. We didn't talk about it in the news, but they announced the new Dragon Age game is coming out on Halloween. So, it basically starts up then and does not let up until, past Christmas. So there's going to be a lot of big games coming out. For everybody who's gone back to school or headed back to school like we are, bless you. Good luck.
Pokemon Go and the New York Times games are good ones to just pick up between classes.
Yeah, I mean, Pokemon Go, you're already walking across campus. You might as well catch a Squirtle while you're doing it. So, try those out and everything. We will be back hopefully next week with a new episode. We've got to figure out our scheduling as everybody has new class schedules. But we'll do that, and we will talk to you very soon. Have a good week.